The movie begins in Russia, where we see a beautiful ballerina named Dominika Egorova. She works for a company called Bolshoi, which provides her with an apartment and also cares for her and her sick mother. One evening, Dominika leaves her mother with a caretaker and heads to work, and after reaching the theater she changes and does makeup before meeting the guests, which includes her uncle Ivan Egorova, the deputy director of the Russian secret services. Her uncle then introduces her to a Russian gangster named Dmitry Ustinov. Just then Dmitry requests to take a photo with Dominika and seizes the chance to inappropriately touch her. Soon the show begins and Dominika delivers a beautiful performance that leaves everyone stunned, but suddenly her dancing partner jumps and lands on her leg, causing serious damage to her ankle. Dominika is then rushed to the hospital where she undergoes surgery, and a few hours later she learns that due to her injury she'll never be able to dance again and her career is now over. On the other hand, we're introduced to another protagonist named Nate Nash, who's a CIA agent. He's seen listening to coded audio and trying to figure out the message. He then pulls a pistol from his desk and goes to meet his Russian mole, whom he calls Marble. Nate meets Marble, who hands him something before continuing to walk in opposite directions. Suddenly the police arrive at the scene and Nate fires a gun to create a distraction so that the cops don't go for Marble. He's then followed through the town until he reaches the U.S. Embassy, and after this incident Nate is compelled to fly back to the United States. The scene then shifts to 3 months later, where we see Dominika, who can now walk but cannot dance like she used to because she can no longer work as a ballerina. The company kicks her out of the apartment and refuses to care for her mother. One afternoon, Dominika's uncle Ivan visits her and offers her a job as a spy in exchange for her mother's medical expenses. He also admits that her leg breaking was not an accident and that her dance partner did it on purpose. To support this claim, Ivan shows inches of her dancing partner kissing the girl who has now replaced Dominika as the lead dancer. He also plays her a recording of a conversation between them, implying that he jumped on her on purpose so that his girlfriend could take on Dominika's position. Later, Dominika returns to the theater to confront the couple who ruined her life. She discovers the two ballet leads making love in the restroom. Without much thought, she viciously hits them both with her walking stick before leaving. When Dominika arrives home, her mother is on the floor and in a very weak condition at this point. Dominika realizes she must accept her uncle's work if she's to provide good care for her mother. The next day, Dominika meets with Ivan and informs him that she's prepared to take on this job. She's tasked with seducing Dmitry Ustinov and getting his information, since the Secret Service is interested in learning more about him. Ivan wants her to use her charms to befriend him and gain his trust. At first, Dominika is hesitant to take on this task, but Ivan persuades her by telling her how bad state hospitals are and how he can provide her mother with the best doctors. Ivan then assures her that she doesn't have to sleep with them and that nothing bad will happen to her that evening. Dominika dresses up and goes to the hotel where Dmitry is about to arrive. When the gangster arrives, he approaches her and after a little talk the two enter a room. Dmitry then tells her to take her clothes off and brutally assaults her. However, their intercourse is interrupted when an SVR agent shows up and murders Dmitry by strangling him with a wire. With this, Dmitry's blood drips on Dominika, who gets taken away by the agent. Afterward, Ivan approaches a distraught Dominika and claims he knew what was going to happen in that room, but he didn't warn her since she wouldn't have done it if she'd known. He then gives her the option of becoming an SVR agent or being executed for witnessing Dmitry's assassination. Having no other option, Dominika accepts his offer to be an SVR Agent now Dominica is sent to State School 4 to begin her Red Sparrow training. This is the institution that specializes in grooming young people for murder through seduction and psychological manipulation. During a class, Dominica and another guy named Victor are asked to strip. In front of everyone, Victor complies with the instructions, but Dominica shows hesitation, for which Matron chastises her. Meanwhile, Nate is back in Washington for his debriefing and he's barred from taking on any further overseas projects. Nate argues that he's been working with Marble for 3 years and that this agent won't cooperate with anyone else. He claims to have a tail, which gives him hope that Marble is still alive, given that the CIA has been unable to contact Marble. They offer Nate one last task. It's then decided that he'll meet Marble in Budapest and get him to communicate through a different agent. On the other hand, Dominica's training continues with exercises like shooting, picking locks, and discovering how various chemicals can be used and tracked. One day, the matron explains to the class what a red sparrow does. Every person is like a puzzle with a piece missing. A red sparrow must identify the other person's true need and fill that void. The students are then presented to the soldiers who have returned home after a year. Matron instructs them to entice the soldier, so Dominica chooses a quiet boy and seduces him. Later, when she's showering, a fellow sparrow arrives and attempts to assault her. However, she immediately yanks the shower handle off and hits him with it. Meanwhile, Ivan is meeting with the superiors, General Korchnoi and Colonel Zakharov. They're talking about Nate being sent to Budapest and how they hope to find Marble through him. Therefore, they decide to send someone to Budapest for an assignment to acquire Nate's trust and disclose Marble's identity. Although Dominica has irritated Matron with her refusal to accept orders, she's offered the assignment to Budapest. Days later, Dominica arrives in Budapest, where she shares an apartment with a fellow sparrow named Marta. She then begins to visit the same swimming pool where Nate frequently goes. Nate is immediately drawn to Dominica, but she plays hard to get and makes up a story about working as a translator for an embassy. But one day she does not see Nate at the pool, and the receptionist informs her that her idea is missing. It turns out that Nate had figured out her real identity. The scene then turns to Nate reporting to his superiors that Dominica has been using multiple names and she has a connection to Ivan. He believes she's valuable and that he can get closer to her to get information. Although his superiors are initially skeptical, they eventually agree with Nate's suggestion. Later, Dominica inspects Marta's room and discovers that she's been assigned to buy confidential information from an important U.S. staff member, Stephanie Boucher. Meanwhile, Nate has invited her to dinner, but she does not show up and instead waits outside for him to leave. She then follows him back to his apartment, staging a little cry. Nate has no idea how she got his address, but she begins kissing him. Nate then takes command of the situation and asks her to return home. The next day, Ivan visits Dominica and inquires about her progress with Nate. Since their superiors are growing impatient, Dominica informs them that she's establishing trust with Nate and getting information gradually. To buy time, she lies and tells him she's also working with Marta on her Stephanie Booster case. Later, when Dominica returns to her flat, Marta has been executing for disclose using the specifics of her assignment. She's then threatened with the same if she does not deliver results. Dominica then goes to Nate's house, where he admits to knowing her true identity. She also shares her side of the story, stressing how she just cares about her mother's well-being, which is why she had to become a spy. Nate asks her to work as a double agent form, promising her protection and stating that he would never treat her like her uncle does. Dominica agrees to this and the two then make love with each other. The next day, Dominica passes a lie detector test conducted by the CIA. When they accept her, she requests some money from them. They laugh at her initially but immediately changed their minds when she tells them she can offer them Stephanie Boucher, who's providing the information to Russia. Dominica then travels to London with her boss. Her Russian orders to meet with Boucher and finalize her transaction. Boucher sells the information for $250,000, but Dominica secretly exchanges it as she leaves the hotel. Boucher becomes aware that she's being observed by U.S. intelligence officers. She then panics and gets killed in traffic by a pickup truck. The Russian agents who are watching Boucher realize that their mission has been compromised and they suspect Dominica of notifying the Americans, so Dominica is summoned to Moscow urgently. Furthermore, Nate realizes Dominica is in trouble, but it's too late to intervene at the airport. Now Dominica is tortured for several days and is frequently asked if she gave Boucher to the Americans. When she says no for the first time, she's stripped naked and placed in a room with her hands tied as water falls on her. The second time, she's hit with a hammer across her legs, arms, and finally her head. And the third time, Dominica is threatened with a gun, but when the trigger's released, it's evident that it was not loaded. Ivan then walks into the room to speak with Dominica. He informs her that he can only provide her with a certain amount of protection. Dominica says this was all part of her game and she wants to convince the Americans of her sincerity. She needed to give Nate a reason to believe her, and now that she's been tortured, Nate will have complete trust in her. Dominica then requests permission to turn and show her ability to complete the work properly. When Dominica returns to Budapest, she's reunited with Nate and they passionately hug each other. He expresses his doubts about her quick release, but she persuades him to relocate her and her mother to America and give her more money, which she accepts. Next, Dominica awakens in the middle of the night to discover that Nate is no longer sleeping next to her. She enters the kitchen and sees Nate chained on a chair with an SVR agent torturing him and inquiring about Marble. At first, she also tortures Nate and inquires about Marble's location. However, when the agent becomes distracted, she attacks them and frees Nate. The two struggle against the agent, but after a long fight they eventually kill him. However, the two are also severely hurt and immediately rushed to the hospital. The next day, Dominica wakes up in the hospital and it appears that her life is over. She's revealed her cover to the Russians by saving Nate's life and she has no more currents to play. Later, General Korchnoi approaches her and informs her that he knows she murdered their agent and is working with the CIA. She becomes terrified and tries to deny the allegations, but General Korchnoi then reveals himself as the Marble. He's the person leaking information to the Americans, and during the night of the police confrontation, Nate fired his gun to protect him. General Korchnoi claims that he was a patriot, but when his wife became ill, the Russian officials forbade an American from operating on her. He states that the entire government is corrupt and that caused his wife to pass away, which is why he became involved with the Americans. Marble believes that he'll be caught soon and does not want to die in vain, so he urges Dominica to expose him so she can become a national hero and take his position as a mole. Dominica does not respond definitively, but after he leaves she checks on Nate and departs afterward. Dominica surrenders to the police and requests to meet the Russian ambassador. When she's brought to him, she tells the ambassador to contact Colonel Zakharov and inform him that she has the identity of the mole, which she'll give him in exchange for her release. And later that evening, a meeting at an airport is planned to complete the exchange. NATO also arrives with her to confirm the identity of the mole. Now Nate expresses his anger by informing Dominica that the Russians will never allow them To capture Marble alive, she claims that one day he'll realize what she's done, but Nate insists that he'll not because he's not in the habit of discarding people. Dominica then begins to approach the Russians while Marble approaches the Americans. All that remains is for Nate to confirm the identity of them all. The bag is lifted, revealing that the man Dominica had identified as the mole is not Korchnoi but her uncle Ivan. In a series of flashbacks we see that Dominica has been working for a long time to convict Ivan. It involves taking a glass from Nate's apartment and putting it in Ivan's, as well as creating a bank account in Ivan's name and having the CIA transfer money into it. Nate notices her scheme right away and verifies that Ivan is their spy, and following the exchange a Russian sniper shoots Ivan and Dominica is taken away in a helicopter. Days later, Dominica is seen receiving an honorary award from the Russian government as everyone applauds. General Korchnoi gives her a smile and a nod, and in the final scene Dominica receives a phone call from an unknown person. The person on the phone is playing Greg's piano concerto, which she previously informed Nate that was the first piece she danced to.